It was a dark and stormy night, and Sarah was driving home from her late shift at the hospital. She had just finished a long 12-hour shift and was feeling exhausted. The rain was coming down in sheets, and the wind was howling, making it difficult to see the road ahead. As she drove down the winding country road, Sarah saw a figure walking in the middle of the road. She slowed down and tried to see who it was, but the rain made it difficult to make out any details. The figure appeared to be a woman, and she was walking barefoot in the pouring rain. Sarah's heart sank as she realized that the woman was in trouble and needed help. Without thinking, Sarah pulled over and got out of her car. As she approached the woman, she could see that she was shaking and scared. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked. The woman didn't answer, and Sarah could see that her clothes were torn, and she had bruises on her arms. Sarah knew that she had to help this woman, and she offered to give her a ride to the nearest hospital. The woman climbed into the car, and Sarah started driving. As they drove, the woman began to tell Sarah a strange and unsettling story. She claimed that she had been abducted by a group of people who had been experimenting on her. They had injected her with an unknown substance and had kept her locked up for days. She didn't know how she had escaped, but she was terrified that they were going to come after her. Sarah listened to the woman's story with a growing sense of unease. Something about the woman's story didn't feel right. As they approached the hospital, Sarah realized that they were being followed. She could see a car in her rearview mirror, and it was gaining on them fast. Panicking, Sarah pulled into the hospital parking lot and ran inside. She told the security guard about the woman in her car and the car that was following them. The guard immediately called the police. As they waited for the police to arrive, Sarah and the woman hid in a storage closet. Sarah could hear footsteps approaching, and her heart started racing. She held her breath as the door opened, but it was just the security guard. "Everything's okay," the guard whispered. "The police are here." Relieved, Sarah and the woman emerged from the closet. The police questioned the woman and took her away for further questioning. As Sarah drove home, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She couldn't stop thinking about the woman's story and the car that had been following them. When she got home, she tried to put the whole thing out of her mind and went to bed. But that night, she had a nightmare. She dreamt that she was back on the road, and the woman was walking towards her. But this time, the woman's face was different. Her eyes were black, and her skin was gray. She reached out and grabbed Sarah's arm, and Sarah woke up screaming. The next day, Sarah tried to forget about the whole thing. But as she drove to work, she saw something that made her blood run cold. There, on the side of the road, was the same woman from the night before. But this time, her eyes were black, and her skin was gray. And as Sarah drove by, the woman turned to look at her, and Sarah knew that she was in grave danger. Sarah couldn't believe her eyes as she saw the woman on the side of the road. She quickly glanced at the rearview mirror and saw the car that had followed them the previous night. The car was parked a few meters away, and she could see someone sitting in the driver's seat. Feeling a sense of danger, Sarah decided to keep driving and not stop. However, as she drove past the woman, she turned her head and looked at Sarah with a cold, dead gaze. Sarah shuddered as she drove past and accelerated the car, leaving the woman behind. Feeling scared and unsure of what to do next, Sarah decided to go to the police station and report the incident. As she described what had happened to her the previous night, and what she had just seen, the police officer's expressions changed from curiosity to concern. One of the officers informed her that a similar incident had been reported a few months ago, where a woman had been abducted and experimented on by a group of unknown individuals. The woman had managed to escape, but the police had never been able to catch the perpetrators. The officers advised Sarah to be cautious and to report any suspicious activities. They also gave her their contact details and asked her to call them if she needed any help. Feeling somewhat reassured, Sarah drove back home, trying to calm her nerves. However, as she entered her house, she noticed something strange. All her furniture was moved around, and some of her belongings were missing. Feeling uneasy, Sarah called the police and reported the break-in. The officers arrived within minutes and searched the house. However, they found nothing out of the ordinary, except for a strange note left on the kitchen table. The note read, "We're watching you, Sarah. You can't escape us." Feeling terrified, Sarah decided to stay with her friend for the night. However, as she tried to sleep, she heard strange noises outside the house. She looked out of the window and saw the same woman from the road, standing outside her friend's house, staring up at her window. Feeling trapped and unsure of what to do, Sarah realized that she was in grave danger. She tried to call the police, but the phone line was dead. As she sat there in terror, she heard a knock on the door. Feeling her heart racing, Sarah slowly opened the door, only to be met with a group of shadowy figures. They dragged her out of the house and threw her into a van. She tried to scream, but her mouth was gagged, and her hands were tied. As the van drove off, Sarah realized that her nightmare was far from over. She had been taken by the same group of people who had abducted the woman from the road. And now, she was their next experiment,